What's up, everybody? My name is Josh LaFleur from Late Start Piano. Today, we're going to be talking about the difference between practicing the piano and playing the piano. So, a lot of people, especially if you're brand new at playing, they don't really realize that there is a difference. You might be thinking about that right now. Well, what's the difference between practicing? Isn't the same as playing? As long as your fingers are hitting the keys, isn't the same thing? Does it really matter? The answer is yes, it does matter, and yes, there is a big difference between the two, and that's what I'm going to explain in this video. So first of all, when it comes to playing the piano is playing what you already know. It's not using your brain. You can kind of turn your brain off and you just rely more on your muscle memory and rely more on your what you've already practiced. Okay. So if you think of a song that you know really, really well, that you can just sit down and you can just play that song immediately. You don't really have to warm up. You don't really have to think about anything. You don't need a lead sheet. You don't need sheet music. You don't need any of that. You can just sit down and you can start playing that song immediately without anything else. If you're at that level and you play that song, you're playing that song. You're not practicing that song because you already know it, right? It's like let's say a scale. If you already know your C major scale and you know it really well, you can play it a few times, but it doesn't really mean that you're practicing. Now, the caveat to this is if you are playing a song that you already know, and if you are fine tuning things, that can be more like practicing. So if you're fine tuning things, maybe like your expressions that you're using, maybe you're using a little rubato, a little bit of time change in there, maybe you're working on a specific measure, you're really trying to accent a certain note, or you're trying to make it much more legato. If you're doing things like that, or if you have your metronome out and maybe you're trying to increase the speed at which you're playing as well, if you're doing things like that, fine tuning what you're playing, that's more practicing. Or like with the scale example, if you know your C major scale, it doesn't mean you're not practicing if you play your C major scale. If you are focusing on what you're doing, maybe you know contrary motion for C major, but you don't know parallel motion. Maybe you don't know how to play C major in thirds or in tenths, right? If you're doing one of those things, or you're really focusing on how you're moving up and down the piano, or you're really focusing on the smoothness of the notes, or maybe one hand you're doing staccato, one hand legato, something like that, that's still practicing. But if you're just mindlessly playing your scales up and down and you already know parallel motion and you're practicing parallel motion, that's not really practicing, that's playing. Which kind of leads me into my next point. What is practicing? Practicing is working on something that you don't know, or like I said earlier, you're working on something you do know, but you're fine tuning it. So in the example I gave earlier, it's like a song that you already know, you can play it really well, but maybe you're going back and you're working on a very specific section of that song. Maybe you're trying to make it much more legato, like I said. Maybe it's a certain accent. Maybe it's your phrasing. Maybe it has a weird rhythm. You're just trying to clean it up a little bit just to make it, 1% better from what you already know. That would be practicing. Or, of course, things that you don't know. If you're learning a new song, if you're learning a new way to play a scale, a new arpeggio, whatever it is, those are the practicing pieces, okay? Even things like Hanon exercises, or like, again, arpeggio practice, you can practice those, but you can also play them. And really the big difference between playing and practicing is the way that you are doing it and where your mind is. It's really a mental thing. It's where your mind is, where your focus is, what are you actually doing? Are you playing the song? Are you practicing the song? Are you playing scales? Are you practicing the scales? Really, the only difference is the mindset, how you're looking at it, how focused you are, and how much you are really just working on a particular thing versus just playing for fun. And by the way, I'm not saying one's better than the other. We all practice the piano so that eventually we can play the piano. We can play what we want to play and it sounds really nice and everybody around it loves it. So playing the piano is not bad. In fact, I suggest at the end of your practice sessions, the last 5 minutes, the last 10 minutes, you should actually just play. Play something fun, play something that you already know so you end on a good note and you are much more motivated to come back the next day. There's nothing wrong with playing the piano, but the majority of it, if you are really trying to get better, you're not okay with just staying the way you are, and that's okay if you are. But if you are trying to get better, then you need to do a lot more practicing and a lot less playing. Okay. And we kind of already talked about the difference. But basically, practicing as well is what makes you get better. So, practicing, doing the fine tuning, doing the more tedious things, like really focusing in on how you're moving, really focusing in on the expression, how the piece is coming out. Are you just playing the notes, or is it musically being played as well? That is what's going to get you a lot better. That's how you get better, is working on these little tiny things that can make a big difference. Okay. Things like expression, like I said, dynamics is a huge thing in music. You don't just want to play the ink that's on the sheet music, play the right notes, I should say. You need to do more than that. If you play the right notes, it might sound okay. But when you start playing with the expression, you start playing with different dynamic volumes, right? Maybe a little rubato, like I said, start playing with the time a little bit, slow down, speed up. That's when that emotion comes. That's where that musicality comes. So that's a great way to practice, even songs you already know, is to practice honing down more of the expression and the dynamics. And that can always be improved, right? Even a little bit, it can always be improved. It can always be better. And that's a great use of your practice time. But that's really how you get better, is you have to use your brain. That's another piece of practicing versus playing. Practicing, you need to use your brain, you need to focus, you need to get in that mental mindset. Playing is more like, it's more like the weekend. You can kind of put Netflix on, just turn your brain off, and you just fucking, you zone out. That's what playing is. And again, there's nothing wrong with that if that's what time it is. But at the same time, you also need to be practicing a lot more. Practicing is like your weekdays. It's like Tuesday at 10 a.m. for those of you that work or have jobs, like you're working. That's your time at work. That's your time to lock in, right? That's what practicing is versus playing. And then finally here, practicing is tough. So I want to acknowledge that as well. Practicing is a lot harder than actually playing. And that's why a lot of people, when they try to practice, they actually end up playing. They end up zoning out. They end up playing things that they already know. They're not using that focus or that extra level of focus, I guess, or admiration looking at the certain piece. They're not really doing that. They kind of zone out and they end up playing songs they already know. They end up playing things without any focus. And especially if you're practicing for only, let's say, 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, you really need to make the most out of that time. You need to utilize that time, whatever it is that you have, in the best way possible. And you need to make sure that your brain and you are mentally all the way in on this practice session. Nothing can pull you out of the way, and you are just completely locked in. And again, one's not necessarily bad, quote unquote, one's not necessarily good, quote unquote, but the majority of your time should be practicing. If you are really trying to get better and that's your goal, I would say at least 90-10. At least 90% of the time you should be practicing. So that's fine tuning things or maybe learning something new. 10% should be just playing for fun, because you do need to have that in there. You don't want 100% practicing, 0% playing, because we all learn the piano so that we can play it and that we can make music and play music that we love. But if you are trying to get better, you want the majority to be actually practicing, actually to be getting better as a piano player. So I would say 90-10. I practice every day. So usually on Sundays is my day. I will do that as like my play day. So on Sundays, if I do an hour or 2 hours, I just play things for fun. Maybe I'll try to make up my own thing. Maybe I'll try to improvise on some lead sheet that I have, whatever. I don't really practice on Sundays. I do a little bit, but usually I'm playing. So I usually play things I already know, just having fun with it, or coming up with my own thing. Every other day, Monday through Saturday, those are my practice days. I don't do any playing. I'm working on things that I don't know, or I'm fine tuning things that need to be fine tuned. So that's kind of the way I do it. If you want to do that, that's fine. But I would say try to do 90% practicing and 10% playing. With all that said, I do have a free PDF on my website, www.latestartpiano.com. On this website and in this guide, I give out 34 essential tips that brand new adult beginner piano players need to know In this guide, we're going to be talking about practice strategies. We're going to be talking about music theory. We're going to be helping you play songs a lot faster and stop you from fighting yourself at the piano. We're going to make it a lot easier for you in this guide. And if you're brand new, at the end of the guide, we're going to walk you through how to play your very first song. If that's interesting to you, that sounds good. Again, head over to my website, latestarpiano.com. Click on that big bright purple button on the page, enter in your name and email address, and you will have instant access to this free guide. One more thing, if you want to take it a step further, I am offering piano lessons right now via Zoom. If you're interested in that, we can set up a day and a time that works best for you. To get in touch with me, send me an email. My email address is latestartpiano@gmail.com. Again, my name is Josh LaFleur with Late Start Piano, and happy practicing.